Do you know what happens when you question the woke orthodoxy? Well, you're about to find out, because this next clip from NBC's Meet the Press was a metaphoric explosion when one of the guests dared challenge the oft-repeated gender pay gap with some statistics. It's a face you don't often see on television. Republican strategist Alex Castellanos, who likes to work behind the political curtain, going after Rachel Maddow when she tried to just roll past the 70 cents on the dollar figure. Let's just get into it.
The Romney campaign wants to talk about women and the economy. The women in this country still make 77 cents on the dollar for what men make. So if women don't make less than men?
Actually, if you start looking at the numbers, Rachel, there are lots of reasons for that.
Wait. Well, don't tell me the reasons are. Do women make less than men for doing the same work?
No, because...
Wow.
Okay. Well, for example, men work an average of 44 hours a week. Women work 41 hours a week. Men go into professions like engineering, science, and math that earn more. Women want more flexible
professions. Listen, this is not a math is hard
No. Yes, it is, actually.
No, it isn't.
Well,
listen.
I have to be honest, I've never seen a straight aversion to statistics like this, regardless of which side of the argument you fall on. Hasn't anyone that's been around long enough noticed something? Why doesn't this figure change over time in popular parlance, having been in vogue all the way since the 1970s? The gender pay gap was first popularized by the National Committee on Pay Equity before being adjusted to 77 cents to the dollar by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But there's a slight problem. Even the principal popularizers of this figure state on their website that the number is an aggregate of the median earnings with a one-dimensional median that fails to take into account factors like job occupancy that truly account for any difference. And by the way, notice the name of the committee: championing pay equity like some communist utopia, seeking equality of outcome, yet none of that nuanced look at facts, and history is convenient, leading to empty conjecture like this.
Right now, women are making 77 cents on the dollar for what men are making.
But that's not true. If so,
Rachel make her point.
Every greedy businessman in America would hire only women, save 25%, and be hugely profitable.
I feel like this is actually, I mean, it's weird that you're interrupting me, not letting me make my point, because we get along so well. So let me make my point.
I will.
But it is important, I think, the interruption is important, I think, because now we know, at least from both of your perspective, that women are not faring worse than men in the economy, that women aren't getting paid less for equal work. I think that's a serious basis, a difference in factual understanding of the world. But given that some of us believe that women are getting paid less than men for doing the same work.
But it's not a question of belief. It's a question of what's actually true. Equity's just not a viable goal, and the moment you make that realization is when you become more open to the reasons for why there's not total equality. Remember a few years ago when there was a cry in the media for why the Women's Soccer World Cup does not pay its female players as much money as men's soccer? It was one of those moments that truly revealed the absurdity of the idea of a blanket equal pay. When there's money and market forces at play, sex discrimination has very little space left. Just for a bit of numerical context, the 2022 FIFA World Cup, for example, generated over $7.5 billion in revenue. Of that, $440 million was the total prize money pool distributed among teams and players. That's around 6% of the total. While the Women's World Cup last year generated $900 million with a prize money pool of $152 million, which is 16% of that total. Is that all down to the rabid sexism in the sport, or a consequence of the different economic realities of the men and women's sports? If you ask CNN, they'll tell you it's sexism.
I love how passionate you are. I wish you were as right about what you're saying as you are passionate about it.
That's
for
really
example,
condescending. This is a stylistic issue.
I'll tell you what.
My passion on this issue
Here's a fact.
is actually me making a factual argument on it. Alex?
May I share one fact with you?
Share.
When you look at, for example, single women working in America today between the ages of, I think, 40 and 64, who makes more, men or women, on average? Men make $40,000 a year. Women make $47,000. When you take out the marriage factor, look at some economics. My point here is that we're manufacturing a political crisis to get away from what this election really wants to be about.
That first line by Alex Castellanos quickly caught on, but he's right. Nowhere in this entire segment do you see Rachel Maddow even attempt to introduce statistics into the discussion. that risks bursting the victimhood bubble she's crafted. These complicated economic and sociological ideas are reduced to sound bites and political sloganeering that eventually carry on for decades. When we're talking about the gender pay gap in the United States, the strides made for female empowerment in the workforce, and the financial incentives in place just don't allow for such massive disparities to last long solely to discriminate against women. I mean, just take a look today at the pay gap between American nationals and migrant workers. It stands at 12.6% today, which makes cheap skilled labor incredibly attractive for businesses. How have women in the labor force supposedly been 23% less expensive to hire and nobody noticed? The answer is they haven't. There's great pieces of work by social scientists like Warren Farrell that demonstrate and knock down the persistent myth of the 77 cents on the dollar, laying out over 25 reasons and differences in choice that account for men being made more in aggregate than women. But predictably, anyone that does not understand the sophisticated studies will be happy to run by the surface level one-dimensional figure that's good for a headline.
I'm saying that there is really 25 choices that men and women have, and every choice that men in general tend to make leads to men earning more money, and every choice that women make tends to them having a balanced, more likely to have a balanced life, which on average is a happier life. And so really men should be learning from women what they can do to sort of have a more balanced life. The discrimination is not about gender per se, and that's very important to remember, because then it frees women up to say, you know, what are the things that I can do, and what are the trade-offs to those things? The road to high pay is a toll road mostly, so you don't want to go into it blind without a knowledge of the trade-offs.
Ironically, it's Warren who's introducing a new angle to this debate that too often gets taken over by talking about money alone. It's a fact that success has many dimensions, and perhaps personal choice and life balance are more important for both men and women than some crude calculation of finances as a metric for success or equality. He also once remarked, quote, "When only one sex wins, both sexes lose." There's a deep complementary quality to men and women that's lost every disparity is reduced to injustice. Perhaps that's also where the calls for equity and equality of outcome also come from. The first step to breaking that is realizing that trying to bend people's free choice, interests, and life paths to fit a twisted notion of equality only ends badly, as history can testify. No one's saying that something like the gender pay gap, if part of it is truly happening because of sex discrimination, should not be done away with. The contention is over the swift glossing over of vital facts and trying to put men and women against each other. In a cold battle in the labor market, there is value that men and women both bring to each other that is far beyond anything that can be calculated in monetary terms. And trying to consistently play a game of vendettas or scorekeeping is bound to breed the kind of resentment we see in the world today. When that happens, no myth or divisive political talking point can survive for long when people truly understand how deeply they're woven into each other in the fabric of society.